Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. My name is Jim Johnson. I am the project manager for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game that Modiphius produces. I'm going to share my screen. I have a short presentation for you and ask that you please hold any questions until after the presentation, mostly because when I share my screen, I can't see the chat window. So if you ask me a question in the middle of it, I just won't see it. So I won't belabor this too much. I'll try to go fairly quickly through it because most of this content is available online already, but I'm happy to talk through it. And then I'll try to spend most of the time answering your questions and getting to know all of you a little bit better. So I will share my screen here and go into the slide presentation. So again, this is a panel for Star Trek Adventures, produced by Modiphius Entertainment. Modiphius is based in the United Kingdom, and I am a freelancer working in the United States. So what is the game? If you're not already familiar with the game, Star Trek Adventures is the latest version of a Star Trek tabletop role-playing game. There have been several other versions of this game in years past from different publishers, including Last Unicorn Games, FASA, and Decipher. The license had been quiet for a number of years after Decipher no longer continued the game, and in 2016, Modiphius picked up the license and started producing the game in 2017. 2017, the first core rulebook came out at Gen Con, and we've gone to continue to publish products for the game since then, and we're continuing on into the foreseeable future. So it will be around for a good long time, hopefully. Basically, the system is obviously Star Trek based. It uses the 2D20 system, which is unique to Modiphius. The 2D20 system was designed by Jay Little and developed by Nathan Dowdell. He produces, he's responsible for designing the game for most of the different game lines at Modiphius. So it's Dune, Conan, Star Trek, and a number of others. So what can you do in this game? If you're not familiar with the game, this is a tabletop role-playing game focused on social conflict and character values. If you've seen any episode of Star Trek, you should be able to take any concept from the Star Trek series that you've seen on television or in the movies and bring that directly to your game table. There is an abstract hand-to-hand and starship combat system in place. You don't actually need miniatures to play the game. As you would in other types of role-playing games. You can certainly use miniatures if you want to. It helps sometimes to visualize the battle space or the game board or whatever, but they are not required. You can play in any Star Trek era, so from Enterprise to Voyager, even Discovery and Picard. We do have those licenses now, so there's a very large time frame that you can play in. And of course, it being Star Trek, time travel is a key part of the intellectual property in the setting. So you could literally use time travel to play in pretty much any time frame if you want to. All character roles are open to you. The Starfleet version of the core rule book focuses primarily on the senior staff and command staff of a Federation starship. So you've got your captain, your first officer, your chief medical officer, engineer, so forth, like you would see on the television shows. But there are options that you can certainly play civilian type characters, non-Starfleet characters. We even have a sub-line for Klingons that I'll show you here in just a moment. So there's quite a lot of variety in the types of characters and the types of roles that you can play within the game. At this point, we have a couple dozen of different species that you can play, so that your character can be, whether it's traditionally a Vulcan or a Bajoran or a human. We've through some of the supplements, we've added quite a few other species that you've seen on the show. So there's a wealth of material there. And as of course, this is Star Trek, so we do have some mechanics built into the game to support scientific research and discoveries, but then you can also carry that out through the actual role-playing of the game itself. And this game, unlike some of the other games, we really tried to focus very, very squarely on the characters. Characters have 6 attributes, they have 6 disciplines. Their skill focuses are ways to really hone in on what they're really good at. So instead of having 2 engineering characters who have basically the same set of skills and the same set of abilities and are kind of cookie cutter in a way, your skill focuses, you can really kind of dig down into the character to make them unique. So between combining skill focuses and a select number of talents, you can create a completely unique character that can do things. And of course, as your character goes through a campaign, you can improve them or change them or adapt them. So as they experience events in the game, you can change those focuses and those talents to really kind of like dial in where they are in a given moment, so that, you know, at the beginning of a series, they're kind of one way, and then at the end, you can see some growth and some progression. This game also has a very strong focus on character values. So what's important to the character? Like, what does it matter? What matters to them? Why do they care? Why are they in Starfleet? You know, what is their perspective on life? And these values, there are mechanics built into the system where those values can be tested. So for instance, if your character has a value that Starfleet is my family, right? And something happens in the course of a game session where they have to challenge that value or pull on that value, there's a benefit to pulling onto that value. And those values may change over time. You know, we've seen plenty of instances on the television shows where characters have a certain belief system or a certain belief or a certain tenet, and they are challenged by that, by the circumstances in the session or in the episode. And sometimes those values change, or sometimes those values become even deeper, right? They become even more ingrained. And so there's opportunities to do that within the game. This game also has an option for a life path. If you're familiar with role-playing games, some games you can basically just kind of like create the character on the fly, you know, throw some statistics on a page of paper, maybe roll some dice to determine what your statistics are, and you're off and running. And other types of games actually have a life path where you go stage by stage through the character's life, from early life to childhood, into their academy years, into their career, and you just go like step by step, you build that character as you go. A lot of folks like the life path system, some folks don't, but we do have that option in there. There are also a couple of other ways to build a character for Star Trek Adventures, and those are all within the core book. I won't belabor it too much, but there are ways to quickly create a character and start playing and kind of discover them as you go. In some cases, some of the supporting characters on Star Trek series, often you don't really know much about them. I think O'Brien is a good example. When we first meet him in The Next Generation, we know his name, and we know maybe like one or two little things about him. And then we see him a few episodes later, and he's playing the cello. It's like, oh, okay, so he plays the cello. And then, you know, so however many other episodes later, he's got a girlfriend, and then he's got a wife, and then he's got a baby. And just like gradually you can build the characters as you go, as opposed to going through the life path and having the character, you know, fully built at the very beginning. Finally, we encourage troop style play. So there's a unique element to this game for Star Trek in that you have a main character, and then of course your Starfleet crew is populated with a number of non-player characters. A lot of those non-player characters could become supporting characters, where if, say for instance, you're playing the captain and there's a away team mission, and you as a player would like to be involved in the away team mission, even if your main character, the captain, is still on the ship, you could actually play a supporting character on the away team. You know, perhaps you pick a security officer or a medical officer or something, and you can actually play that character on the away team. So that way, you as a player are still involved in the scene, even if your character is not involved. Some folks really enjoy the ability to kind of like switch back and forth between different characters. So I'll quickly go through the products that are available. Again, all of this is available online, so it's not. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Of course, we have the core rulebook. This is the first core rulebook that came out. It's in 2 editions. There's a collector's edition with the Enterprise D on the cover, and then the standard cover. You can see the layout is a black background with a LCARS style design from The Next Generation. We also have 2 additional entry points into the game. So if you're curious about the game and you're not quite sure you want to, buy into the full core rule book, we have a free quick start PDF that's available online for download. And we also have a boxed starter set that contains pre-generated characters, short campaign, maps, dice, tokens for momentum and threat, everything you need to start playing the game in a box. And then if you enjoy the boxed game experience, you can then graduate into the core book if you want. As a complete side option to the Starfleet experience, we just recently released the Klingon Empire core rulebook. This is the same core rulebook, but completely rewritten from the top down from a Klingon perspective. And actually, it's about 30 to 40 pages longer, just because we tried to put as much Klingon material into this book as we possibly could. There is a leather-covered edition, collector's edition, and then there's the standard edition there in the center. And you can see we completely changed the layout to make it much more Klingon-oriented, Klingon-focused. One of the complaints we've heard about the game over the years is that in print, this black background is fairly hard to read in some cases. So we decided to experiment with a white background, and that seems to be reasonably favorably received. But we wanted just a very different look for the Klingon experience, so we presented that. We also have a quick start coming out pretty soon for the Klingon Empire core rulebook experience, and that Klingon quick start will be out, I think, probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm almost done finalizing it, so we'll have that out pretty soon. Moving on into the game products itself, we have 3 division source books: Operations, Command, and Sciences, and these expand on each of those divisions. So whether your character is a command focused or con, flight control, operations, engineering, science, or medical, these books will give you more options to expand on the material already in the core rule books. And even though these are Starfleet covers, we designed the Klingon core rule book to be compatible with these. So if you are looking for more information about your Klingon commander or your Klingon doctor or your Klingon engineer, these books will still be relevant for your needs. We also have a series of quadrant source books. These go into more details on each of the 4 quadrants. The Gamma Quadrant source book is primarily focused on the Dominion War, although it does provide a lot of information about the Gamma Quadrant itself. And then, of course, the Delta Quadrant is all about the Voyager, all about USS Voyager and her travels through the Delta Quadrant. And of course, Alpha and Beta provide content about those quadrants as well. These are full of additional playable alien species for players. So if you want to play different races, or I'm sorry, different species, you can check these books out. And loads of plot hooks and ideas about how to run a game in these different quadrants. Like if you want to play a game in the Delta Quadrant, what can you expect? What can you throw at your players? Check each of those out. Moving on, a lot of game masters like to have pre-written adventures to use in your campaigns. Sometimes you need a break and you don't have time to write one, and you just want to use a pre-generated one. These are the Voyages is the first mission compendium that has 8 adventures in it. And then the second one is Strange New Worlds, and that has 9 adventures in it. Most of the adventures in these 2 books are usable in any era, so you can adapt them for use in any Star Trek era. Some of them were written specifically to a given era, but you can still tweak them, as needed. If it's a Enterprise adventure and you want to use it in the original series, you can do that, or vice versa. In addition to these 2 are books. These are actually hardcover products. In addition to those adventures, we also have a series of adventures that are digital only. So you can go to DriveThruRPG or Modiphius.net and buy these as short PDFs. They're like $3 or $4. I'm not sure what that translates to for euros. I'd have to check, but we have, I think, 9 or 10 of these available, standalones by themselves, in addition to the 17 adventures in the 2 books. We also have some other exclusive PDF exclusive products. We have crew packs. So I know a lot of fans like to see what their favorite characters look like, statistically in terms of the game. So all of this slide is a little bit out of date. So we actually have the original series, Next Gen, DS9, Enterprise, and Voyager crew packs all available. So if you're ever curious about, what does Janeway or Sisko or Kirk look like in terms of the game, check these packs out. They're all there. I know some game groups like to actually play the characters that they see on the show. So this is an opportunity to do that as well. We also have some other free products out there, free PDFs. I'd encourage you to check those out at your convenience. We also have a range of miniatures. When the game launched back in 2017, we had a few different miniature packs. We've since expanded the miniatures line to 8 different packs. I know that miniatures has not been a priority for Star Trek for a while now, and now that Modiphius is producing the Elder Scrolls role-playing game and the Fallout Wasteland Warfare role-playing game, miniatures games, those are absolutely the priority for the company right now. And I'm hoping to fit in some more Star Trek miniatures along the way, but for now, these are the 8 sets that we have available. But again, I should emphasize that the game is not reliant on miniatures to play. So these are really more nice to have than required. But again, that probably depends on your particular game group. Other accessories, of course, we have themed dice. We have Klingon and Federation map tiles, and of course we have a Game Master screen as well for those that are game mastering and want to make use of the charts and tables available on the screen. In addition, we have a couple of Klingon accessories. We have a Klingon Game Master toolkit coming up that has a Game Master screen, map, an adventure, and some reference cards, all we using the Klingon aesthetic that we created for the Klingon core book. And we've also commissioned a unique set of Klingon dice that use the Klingon symbol instead of the Starfleet Delta on the one face for the D20s and on two of the faces for the D6s to represent effects. So those the dice should be available now, and the Game Master toolkit is on the way. Should be here probably in I think April's the most recent date I heard, coming from the printer. We also have a couple of upcoming releases. If you are at all familiar with the game, or if you're not, I'll tell you. When the game launched in 2017, we had a playtest series of adventures that were available online, and then we started a living campaign that was basically producing free adventures incrementally over a period of time that would start to tell an epic story about the original series, and then continuing into the Next Generation era, about a unique alien species called the Tilical. And over the course of about a year and a half, we got the first, quote unquote, season of the living campaign completed. And then at the time, there was declining returns in terms of like people downloading it, people sending feedback, and we put it on hold for a little while to work on other products, and then we decided to come back to it and produce a full-blown hardcover campaign guide, and that will be out in Q2 21. So I'm looking forward to having everybody see that. And then in Q3, probably August-ish, we'll have a full tricorder set. This is the original series tricorder. We have a box with a magnetic flap that can contain all the contents. It's a digest-sized pocket version of the core rulebook, the Starfleet core rulebook, updated with some of the content that we included in the Klingon core book, as far as some of the rules tweaks that we made. Entirely original series themed, some unique captain's dice. So we took Captain Kirk's green tunic and adapted that for use as a set of D20s, along with some D6s, tokens, 2 sets of character sheets, and a 3-part campaign as well, all based in the original series. So for those of you who looked at the core rulebook and saw the very strong Next Generation era theme in it, and we're really wanting something original series themed, the tricorder set is aimed directly at you. We even have even more releases in 2021 and beyond planned. I can't tell you. If you're familiar with DS9, you know that this is Sloan, the supposed leader of Section 31, and I am not at liberty to divulge the details about the new releases, but I hope you will be excited by them. I will say that we've already announced, Modiphius has already announced that we do have the licenses to both Discovery and Picard, so you can look forward to products supporting both of those series as well. I can tell you that much at least, but as far as the specific products, it's yet to be announced. Just minor information if you're curious about the game itself. Won a number of awards over the years. Always nice to see the industry recognition for that. And a number of resources that you can tap into. You can go to the website, modiphius.com/Star Trek. Go to the web store, modiphius.net, and any retailers and game stores in your area. The official forums are there on Modiphius's website. There are a number of Facebook groups, Reddit, subreddits, Discord channels. There's a wealth of Star Trek Adventures material out there. I'm on Twitter all the time. If you have any questions about the game, you can email support@modiphius.com, or you can email me directly, Jim Johnson at modiphius.com. I am happy to take emails anytime. And that is it. So I will stop sharing my screen. And at this point, I think I'm happy. I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. And I see that we're only about 20 minutes into it. So that is my spiel. So I am happy to kick it over to anybody who wants to either facilitate questions or just ask away. I'm happy to answer what I can.
So you can type in on our chat on bottom left, or you can raise your hand with the icon, and we will see and name you. I have one question for a start, because on previous panel we was discussing the lower decks. Have you saw this series?
Yeah, I've seen Lower Decks. I like it. I think it's an interesting change of pace for what we've seen on Star Trek so far. And the last I heard, CBS hasn't done a lot of licensing for it yet. I mean, they've done some strategic licensing for it yet. We have our eyes on it. I think it would be fun to do some sort of product for Lower Decks. I don't know what that would look like just yet. But I enjoyed the show. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I really appreciate that Star Trek is such a big property now. I mean, it's 50-something years old, but I love that they're willing to play with it and to do different things with it. Like I know the fan base is kind of split on it. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I mean that's true for any Star Trek series, honestly, right? But no, I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah. So my question is connected with this the Lower Decks because when I watched it, I realized that it is very similar to role-play sessions. Which I play with my players. Yeah. So we discussed it would be great to have a starter set or quick start in this the Lower Decks era. So this is idea for you because this idea got some enthusiasm on previous presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I often, so on these different presentations and discussions, I often joke, even though it's true, I have this huge whiteboard, right? And this whiteboard is full of ideas, like full of product ideas that we've been collecting over the years, either on our own, because I mean, everybody involved in Star Trek Adventures is a Star Trek super fan, right? Like I've been gaming Star Trek for 30-odd years. I've been a Star Trek fan my entire life. Like I know what I want as a game. Like if I wasn't involved in this game, I know what I want on the table with my players. And so like the whiteboard, I think we've got like 70 or 80 products on the whiteboard that we would love to do in some fashion. And it's just a matter of figuring out, like, A, do we have the rights to do it? And B, do we have the bandwidth and the time and the people to put into it and do it? And it's just a matter of like figuring out how do you fit them all into the release schedule, right? But Lower Decks, like as soon as the series was announced, we were like, okay, let's put that on the list. Like Lower Decks, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds, even the Section 31 series that hasn't even been greenlit yet, right? As far as we know. All that stuff is on the whiteboard in various different permutations and possibilities. So I love the suggestion, and I'll just put a check mark next to it on the whiteboard because this means, yep, we got another suggestion for that one. So we'll just make sure to make.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean we have a free download Kobayashi Maru scenario. So like if you're playing cadets or Lower Decks or something, that might scratch the itch a little bit because it gives you a chance to play cadets and to get yourself blown up by the Kobayashi Maru and the Klingons or whatever. But yeah, absolutely thinking about it. But thanks, Flora. We'll absolutely add that in.
Okay, so we have two questions on chat. Will there be a Klingon-specific campaign or mission book?
A mission book, that's a great question. So we have that on the whiteboard as well. I have several standalone Klingon adventures in the works, like that'll be released as PDFs. And I think, just off the top of my head, informally, I would say that we'd probably wait to see how those sell before we commit to a full-blown hardcover. I think a hardcover would probably do okay, especially because the Klingon core book is doing really well. So I think that's to be determined at the moment, but we do have adventures coming for the Klingons. There's going to be an adventure in the toolkit. There's a full adventure in the toolkit. But I'll check mark that suggestion too and see if we can make that happen. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. So the next question: does the Quick Start Guide have enough material in it for someone who's never played this system before to create characters and play a session?
So the quick starts were specifically designed to get you playing the game quickly. So the quick starts do not contain any character generation information. You would get that from the actual core book. What the quick starts do contain, though, are pre-generated characters, right? So the Starfleet quick start has, I think, 5 or 6 characters in it already built for the system that you can immediately drop on the table and start playing. And the Klingon quick start has 6 characters as well already built into it. Now, if you're familiar with the system a little bit, or if you even just look at the quick start and kind of read through it, you could probably change the pre-gens. You can change their values, change their focuses, and tweak the numbers a little bit. I mean, you could probably kind of like cobble together a new character just by using the pre-generated material and the quick starts. But again, the actual character generation, the character creation rules, all that stuff is in the core rule book, because we wanted the quick starts to be designed, specifically just to get you playing the game and getting you into it. Thank you for the question.
Okay, so Sarah asked about the new TOS pack. Does it need core rule book starter set, or can I get it as my starter set on its own? So it is a starter pack, independent game, or maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, and I apologize for not clarifying that when I was mentioning it on the presentation. So the tricorder set, the tricorder set is really the game in a box. It's got the digest version of the core rules, which is it's a 304-page digest. So literally, we took the Starfleet core rule book, we stripped out all the content that was TNG era and later, and rewrote all the examples and all the text to make sure it was focused on the original series as opposed to anything else. So like if you read the original core rule book, there are some examples in there, about next gen characters, and we cut all that out and changed it into original series. So like if you're an original series fan, this is the rule book that you're going to want, because it's all about the original series. But all the rules are in the digest. So it's character generation, it's combat, it's advancement, mechanics, starships, all that stuff is in the tricorder set. You also get dice, two packs of characters. You get the original series characters, and then also the USS Lexington crew, and a 3-part campaign, all on the book. I think we put the reference cards in there too. So really, if you want the full game experience, you don't need the starter set, you don't need the quick start. You just get the tricorder set, and you're good to go. Because that's technically a third core rule book, even though it's a cut down version of the Starfleet version book. So you don't actually need you don't need a core rule book if you're buying the tricorder. You can just get the tricorder because it's all there. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I have another question from myself. I watched many recorded sessions on YouTube. There are some great examples, and I very liked Shield of Tomorrow. They made a lot of episodes, but I noticed something that it's something similar with my games. So this spaceship combat, I don't know if you got these questions. It's a bit tricky, and even if I watch Shield of Tomorrow or other recorded sessions, I see that they skip they skip most of these rules, the power management, and so on and so on. Also, when I play Star Trek Adventures, I also skip it because I think it's too complex to have it in a 4-hour session. Do you plan maybe or considered to have some Starship Combat Lite version of it, maybe for groups which focus on role playing, not the mechanical traits of momentum and threat?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So thanks for asking it. The rule set was designed by Nathan, and I think it's really up to each game group to decide what they want to do with it, whether they use all the different pieces and bits of it in their game, or if they choose to use only certain parts of it and go more narrative and spend less time with the power management and other things. I've watched game sessions from all kinds of people on YouTube and Twitch, and like some use it only a little bit, like Shield of Tomorrow did, and some go into much more greater detail. And I think it's really just a matter of finding what balance of it works for you and your group. Like my particular group, we've been playing now for over a year and a half now, and we've only had a handful of space combat opportunities, right? Because they tend to find ways to talk themselves out of fights, and I give them the opportunity, but they find ways to talk themselves out of it, and which is fine. But I tend to run rules light anyway, So like I love the system, but I just don't need to use as much of it that's there. I'm glad that it's there, and we would get into it more granularly if we needed it, but I just haven't. Me personally, just haven't needed it. But we do have a developer blog that we put on the website that we release new articles every couple weeks or so. And I know Nathan has a couple in the works about how to approach space combat and how to use it either as it's written or how to streamline it. So those might be useful for some folks to look at just to kind of get a sense of it. But as far as like creating a rules light version of it, we'd have to continue to think about that, right? I mean, the game's what, 4 years now. What we did do, though, actually, let me go back a little bit. In the if you look at the Klingon book, we did simplify certain parts of space combat, where as far as like when your ship takes damage and you start getting into breach type of damage, instead of having each system have its own set of options for damage, we kind of simplified that a little bit. So that's something that you might want to take a look at. It's certainly not required, and it's not a change to the system. It's just another option. Both the Starfleet core and the Klingon core are compatible with each other, and it just gives game masters and players more options to decide like how do we want to approach either space combat or other parts of the game. So I'm not sure that answered your question exactly, but let me know if I can clarify anything.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the personal combat, it's very streamlined and fast. So you don't roll there if you hit leg or arm of your opponent. You just do harm, and it goes narratively. So this is like a big contrast with this, but of course, every group has to choose which rules are fine for them, and do their stuff.
Yeah.
So, do we have any more questions from people? I cannot see any on chat. Well, I want just to ask the follow-up on the lower decks because the time zone is in TNG. Because it's, but it is out of your license. I mean, you cannot use these characters, but if well, most of my games are the lower decks style, so so I was basing on your materials which are available now, and they are playing very well. So I wanted to ask because most of the materials have focus on these senior officers, and sometimes you can switch to your ensign something to someone to get to the planet and so on. But sorry, I lost it.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, if we don't have the license, to lower decks right now. So we couldn't include any of the characters that you've seen on the show, or the spaceships, right? Like the Cerritos, was it the California class, right? We can't write up the California class for the game yet. So, but if we are able to get the license, then of course we'd find a way to fold all that into the game. I know there are plenty of fan resources out there. I think there's some great fan websites out there, including Continuing Mission, that fans are just creating content for the game, right? Because like fans can do that because you don't have to wait for the CBS approval process, and you don't have to wait for somebody to approve. I mean, technically you're not supposed to, but CBS historically hasn't really come down on fans doing that kind of work. So I'd say look to that in the short term, but hopefully in the next year or two we are able to get the lower decks license, and then we can add all this stuff into it. We're just not there yet, but I like that the timeline kind of continues after Next Generation. Although so far, like the stuff we've seen on screen, they haven't really changed anything major yet, right? They're in that kind of sweet spot in between the end of Nemesis and Picard, right? So like the big things on Romulus haven't happened yet, so they're able to kind of like play around on the edges of the canon, right? But it was great to see Riker and Troy on the Titan, right? I love the Titan series of novels. So it was really cool to see the Titan finally on screen, canonically, right, in canon. So that was really cool.
We have two more questions.
Okay.
Alexander asks, do you plan to design a supporting app for online sessions?
Yeah, so we're not going to actually design it ourselves. That's just way too expensive. But a third party has created a character creator application. So if you go onto Google or whatever search engine, there is a Star Trek Adventures character app where you can go in and you can create a character step by step through the app. It's free. It's updated with all the content up to the Delta Quadrant sourcebook. I don't think the developer has put the Klingon stuff in there yet. But that's a great resource if you want to build a character for your game sessions, whether they're online or offline. Roll20 is one of the virtual platforms. We have some resources built into that, including a character sheet and a dice roller, which makes it pretty easy to go in there and create and do to roll your dice. My group actually uses Roll20 and Discord, but there are a couple of other virtual platforms that have support. I think I can't even remember the names of them now. Fantasy Grounds and I think Tabletop Simulator have some resources. And I know Modiphius company-wide is working on creating more support virtually for all of our games. And that's all work in progress. There are a lot of different ones in play right now, and they're all in varying stages of development and approvals and beta testing and all that stuff. I mean, it's just a huge amount of work to translate the game from print format into the virtual tabletops. So we do have more support coming. It'll just take a little while to get there, but good question.
We have another question about Romulan core book. Yeah, it's a recurring one.
Yeah. So we don't have any plans. We don't have any plans to do a Romulan core book, but we are looking at more ways to support Romulan player characters. That being said, if you have the Starfleet core rule book, you can actually create Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, etc. right out of that core book. We provided some sidebars with some basic information about how to play a Romulan or a Cardassian, depending on what your needs are. But we do have more support coming for Romulans. It's not going to be in the format of a core rule book, mostly because there's just not enough content out there for any other species other than like if you look at the at the IP, right? Like the Klingons are the big one that has the absolute most amount of either in setting material or even outside setting material, right? Like the fact that the Klingon Language Institute exists and that there are fluent native, they're not native, of course, right? But there are fluent Klingon speakers all around the world. Like there's nothing like that for any other Star Trek species that I can think of, because I don't think most of them even have a formalized language, right? Other than seeing like bits and pieces of it sprinkled into an episode. Like there's some Vulcan and there's some Cardassian and there's some Romulan sprinkled out there, but for like an actual dedicated core rule book, I think the Klingons were the top choice, and I just don't see anything comparing to that in terms of the depth of canon material that we have to pull from, and the ancillary support. So we will find ways to support other species and playing them in the game, but I'm pretty confident it's not going to take the format of yet another core rulebook. Partly because we also don't want to split the fan base too much, right? I mean, we have the Starfleet experience and we have the Klingon experience. We don't want to keep adding core rule books to the line because it just gets unwieldy after a while. Let's see.
Okay, do we have?
Thanks for putting the link into the character app. I appreciate that. Absolutely, check out that app because you can create characters, main characters, supporting characters, and starships with that application. So it makes it really easy to use.
Yes, it's really great, and I also use it. Do we have any more questions concerning the game? I don't see any. Well, thank you, Jim, for joining us in this talk.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Yeah, I want to thank also for Błażej for translating to Polish this event.
Thank you very much. But since nobody else has any questions, I do have one. I'm going to ask in English, and I'm going to quickly translate into Polish, and I'm going to translate the answer as I listen to it, because I'm very curious. You said that there is more stuff coming with new series, the new licenses, and so I understand Picard and Discovery. Both of them are kind of divisive series when it comes to how people like them. But what I'm very, very curious is what new things for the Star Trek adventures can we kind of look forward to specifically from those two new series? Because they seem like, much like Lower Decks, they're a new approach to Star Trek in many ways. So can we expect some new approaches to Star Trek, the adventure game, coming from the products that will be tied to those properties?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not really at liberty to go into a lot of detail because we're still working on those products. I think if you and this will be a dodge, but it's what I have to do, right? If you've watched this series, and if you kind of understand what we do in our products, like how we approach our products and the kind of content that we provide in the products, and then you watch the shows and you kind of think about, okay, how does that show translate into a product? I think you could probably guess at kind of some of the ideas that we're going to be approaching, like and I'll just give you a specific example, like Picard, right? Picard, very much not focused on a Starfleet crew, right? They're former Starfleet officers, but they're not on a Starfleet ship, and it's a huge mix of characters. I mean, really, Picard is almost, if you look at the Picard, like in terms of like not the storyline, but in terms of the characters, right? And what they're doing, that's almost like a role-playing game group, right? You got all kinds of random characters just kind of like thrown into a ship, and they're off on an adventure. You got former Starfleet people, you've got a Romulan, the
warrior.
Warrior, yeah. I mean, and you got the civilian doctor, and you've got just all this huge random mix of characters just kind of like thrown into the soup here, right? So I think, without giving anything away, just by the very nature of what Picard is, you can expect we'll provide some guidance on like how to run a game that isn't Starfleet, and it's not Klingon. It's a melange of stuff thrown together. It's almost that independent style of game. I mean, it's not Firefly in Star Trek, right? Or it's not you're not playing a smuggler in the Star Trek setting, but I mean you just get the sense that the Serenia and Cristobal Rios and like they have a different life post Starfleet, right? And we're going to attempt to address that in game terms, and keep it faithful to the canon, and say, okay, now that we have the Picard license, here's this material to think about. Okay, you're not a Starfleet, but also getting into the weeds a little bit about the characters. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean to Rios and to Rafi to no longer be in Starfleet? Like, what changed their values, right? Their values changed somewhere along the way in the game, and like, how does that impact them as characters and people? And like, how has the universe changed since the end of Nemesis? Like, and how is the Romulan, the diaspora, basically, right? How has that impacted them? And then, of course, you've got the XBs, right? You got the whole Borg element there too, plus the Fenris Rangers. I mean, there's just a wealth of material that we've seen in just the first season, plus having to figure out like, how do we fill in that gap, right, between the end of Nemesis and Picard? There's 20 odd years of canon material that hasn't really been touched on canon wise, and like, how do we bridge that gap? How do we explain to players and game masters, here's probably kind of what happened, and how things in the setting impact you, heading into Picard? And that's going to be tricky because we're going to have to work pretty closely with Viacom CBS to make sure that we don't accidentally step on any toes that they're planning on doing. I mean, we're not creating canon content anyway, because we're not canon. It's only what you see on screen is canon, but we just want to be careful that we're presenting stuff in such a way that we're not contradicting anything they've done. And this will be one of the first books. Discovery and Picard are going to be unique for us. This will be new because both of these shows are actively on the air, right, and in production. So like, where we could write a DS9 book and be pretty confident that it's going to be accurate for forever, because they're not probably going to do any more DS9 stuff. But like, who knows what's going to happen in Picard season 2, right? They could go any number of directions, and we don't have access to the scripts or to any of the preliminary stuff. We see what happens on screen just like everybody else does, and then we just have to react to that when it happens. So like, we're developing Picard and Discovery material now, but we know that when Discovery season 4 comes out or Picard season 2 comes out, like, the stuff we're working on could theoretically be rendered obsolete, and we're just going to have to make sure we put a disclaimer in the books that say, hey, be aware that these shows are actively in production, and what you're reading now may not be true when the next series comes out. And that's just the nature of doing a licensed game that is actively in production. But all this is a long-winded way of saying I can't tell you everything, but if you watch the shows, if you're watching Discovery and then you're watching Picard, and you've seen the game, right? We try really hard to focus the game onto the experience that you're seeing on screen. So like if you're watching Next Gen or DS9 or Enterprise, like you should feel confident that you can take that experience that they're having on screen and translate that to the table. And we want to do that same thing for Discovery and for Picard as well. So if you're seeing these characters in Picard going through the challenges that they had in their series without really Starfleet support, without really, support other than each other and the circumstances that they had, that's probably the kind of experience you can expect from whatever Picard product we come out with. And same thing with Discovery. We haven't even talked about Discovery really, right? But season 1 was all about the Klingon War, and so you can expect some support as far as like how do you conduct a war. Like if you're playing a role-playing game and you want to play through a war, like we touched on that quite a bit in the Gamma Quadrant source book, talking about the Dominion War. Like here's how does a war impact your characters? Like, if your character joins Starfleet to be a scientist and all of a sudden they're thrust into a wartime situation, like how does that impact the character, right? Discovery had kind of the same situation where they're scientists and all of a sudden the Klingon War erupts and their science, especially on the Discovery, right? The scientists were pushed into the situation where their ship was uniquely suited to make major changes to the war. And Discovery will be tricky, I think, because there is only one Discovery, right? There is only one ship with a spore drive, and so we're going to have to kind of like talk around that a little bit. Not to mention the fact, right? Like if you've watched the show, at the end of season 2, like everybody who knew anything about the Discovery was supposed to conveniently forget about it, right, and not ever talk about it. So like, how do you write a setting supplement book where like the main ship, you're not even supposed to talk about it, right? Like, nobody in the setting is supposed to say anything about Discovery because it's not there, and you have to kind of like think about that and like, okay, so extrapolate from there. Like that means like billions of people in the Federation knew what was happening and now can't talk about certain things. It's like how do you rationalize that against what we see in the original series, right? So there's only like 6 or 7 years of time in between Discovery, end of Discovery season 2 and the start of the original series, right? So like in the space of 6 or 7 years in the IP, how does the Federation go from on the brink of destruction by the Klingons to what we see in the original series where they're out exploring, pushing the envelope of the Federation, Kirk doing his thing, Pike doing his thing, their crews doing their things. Like there's a little bit of a disconnect there in my mind anyway. And we just need to figure out creatively how do we explain that, because we know for a fact that game masters and players, if they're in there playing a game set in that time period, they're going to have questions, right? They're going to want to know what happened from point A to point B. Are we in an alternate universe? Is it all the same prime core setting? Like what are the options here? And so we're going to make sure we provide as many possibilities as possible so that people can confidently do some cool stuff with the setting. So it'll be interesting. So I hope that answers your question, and I apologize if I went on a tangent.
Thank you very much. That did answer my question, and I'm already excited to see what those new products will bring. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, so do I. Also waiting for these products. So
yeah, I'm excited too, and I think I'm excited because of exactly what Discovery and Picard are, right? They're the current shows on air, and love it or hate it. It's hard to say this because I love it. Like I love everything Star Trek, right? I'm a super fan. I'm a super geek. Star Trek is in my lifeblood. And I know that there are fans that love the new series and there are fans that absolutely hate them. And I don't quite get, just cognitively, I don't understand why they hate the new stuff. But however you approach the new stuff, what Discovery is doing and what Picard is doing is creating new Star Trek fans, right? So there is a whole new generation of Star Trek fans coming into the intellectual property that me as a fan want to support and get involved in playing the game, but also me as a project manager, I want more people buying the stuff and playing the game and having fun and posting their experiences online so that we can all read them and share them and just like say, wow, you're doing some amazingly cool stuff with the game and with the property, and you're telling great collaborative stories with your friends. Like, it's just amazing to see the stuff that's out there, and to be able to tap into the new generation of fans that are coming in is just a treat. And I really want to be able to get stuff in their hands so that they can play with it and have fun with it. So I'm really excited about Discovery and Picard, and I really hope that we can pick up the licenses for Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Strange New Worlds too, because I think those 3 series are adding more fans too, right? Like the casual fans, I think, looked at Lower Decks and really responded well to it because it's a little more cynical, it's a little more goofy, and it's a little more like not quite as serious. I think sometimes maybe Star Trek takes itself a little too seriously, and there's some really deep, heavy episodes that you're like, wow, this is hard stuff, which is absolutely great because that's exactly what it's for. But there's also an opportunity to kind of like look at the lighter side and to be a little goofy and say, you know what, Star Trek can support goofy as well as the serious Shakespearean drama that you see in the Klingon episodes. So it's just broadening the appeal of the brand, really. And if we can broaden the appeal of the RPG brand along with it, I'm all for it, right? As a gamer and as the project manager, I want more people playing and having fun. So I'm really excited for both of these. Yeah, good comment, because the new Star Trek's not Utopia story anymore. Yeah, I think they've really stretched the envelope in terms of what kind of stories that they're telling. Especially Discovery Season 3, I think, really kind of stretched the Utopia quite a bit because there's a lot of challenges there. Good comment. Any other questions that anybody has? We got a couple more minutes. I can expound.
I can see any. Also, we have another panel on Discovery and Picard, so we'll be discussing in 10 minutes. But if you have any questions on Star Trek Adventures.
Yep, and if you don't have any questions right now, again, please don't hesitate to reach out anytime. I'm pretty easily found on Twitter. I use the hashtag Star Trek Adventures all the time. Plenty of the other Star Trek writers and Nathan, the rules developer, is there as well, so we're easy to reach there. Of course, there's the Modiphius discussion boards, there's Facebook groups, a number of different resources online that you can reach out to. I'm happy to take questions anytime, so don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope you check out the game. I hope you enjoy it if you do check it out, and always open to comments and criticisms, because that only helps the game get better for everybody. So eager to hear your feedback.
So thanks, Jim, and well, yeah, live long and prosper. Thanks, amazing job. I also really enjoyed the game, so thanks, and well, see you soon, because it is not the last event we make.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Had a great time, and I hope the rest of you have a great time with the rest of your convention.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.